All right. Thank you all for joining. The big news is that we fused the codas last week in a very exciting knowledge engineering activity. So what was the knowledge engineering separate coda, we just copied everything in to one. And then made that one that's still up, but the cover page just links back to this main core one. So we kind of streamlined down to one document. We'll still have the live meeting section for now, alternating on these Fridays, but just in recognition of seeing how that it just was more like we were just working on what we needed on the week by week. So just go down to a single link, but then we'll keep the alternating just for fun and for the way it was. What topics or who would like to begin or share with anything? Or we at the top, we'll have this kind of just the single top sheet. Here's what's happening in 2024. Have more detail in the folding, but just try to keep this single top level. That this one is more like just the entry point. So who wants to go with anything that's on here or add something else to something on here?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to share something quick. So work on developing a prototype of like an initial systems language implementation is progressing pretty nicely. And that work feels relevant to what I'm doing with the systems modeling SIG, the work with the GST SIG, and some of the stuff we're doing with the active inference collab. So this public page that is, yeah, I don't think ready to be super public, but is getting closer to being ready for anyone who is curious and wants to get involved, but doesn't have time to read the textbook, is coming along nicely. So any comments, especially on these first two pages, theory and design, would be greatly appreciated. The roadmap and the deep systems analysis components are still a work in progress, but yeah, any feedback on theory and design in terms of making it accessible would be very useful. But that's kind of what I've been focusing on my end.
I'll ask a couple of questions on that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The systems, well, let me, well, yeah, I don't know what comes first. Systems language, I mean, is that something that I know you're working with George on from his book and System Ease and things of that nature? I mean, is that an ISSS SIG, or is it something that you're leading on your own, as it were? Not on your own, but with George? And I mean, I know that's an interest of yours. So is it, when you say a website, is that going to be your website or on ISSS website, or what's the plan there?
Yeah, great question. So it is, I would say, primarily something that I'm working on my own with George, and I have a friend, Joe, who has joined the ISSS as a guest member, and he's a very talented software engineer. And so he's the one who's actually coding up the prototype. We spent a few months doing a deep dive into the math in the textbook, and now he's coding. In the short term, I've just set up this simple Notion page so that I don't have to like explain the basics in conversation every time I talk about it. I can just send them to this page. And I do think this work will be the focus of my systems modeling SIG within the ISSS.
Okay.
Beyond that, I don't know the extent to which the ISSS would like to be involved now or in the future. But yeah, my work in the systems modeling SIG will be focused on using this language to model specific systems of interest like neurons and Bitcoin and organizations and such.
So, okay, that's helpful. So then that was the second question, was on systems modeling.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm interested in that topic, and have for a couple of years been using OpCloud from Dov Dory, and particularly with Mark Pearson, who's using it extensively for his work. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention, whether or not you're familiar with OpCloud. I have an account, not-for-profit account through the College of Exploration with OpCloud so that we can use their modeling tool, which we've been doing a little bit with Mark Pearson and Kerry Turner, both of whom are ISSS members, to model a number of different systems. So, you know, Mark, I think, is still a member of ISSS, and Kerry Turner, they may be interested in your systems modeling work, and you may be interested in the OpCloud.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do think another great activity for the SIG will be for people to showcase and highlight the systems modeling approaches that they are experts in, so we can compare and contrast. So I spent some time learning about Tom's work with UML and have been diving into some of his UML diagrams. And I think it would be incredible to have people bring their different approaches so we can compare and see what works in which situations.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, what Tom has done is a different kind of modeling. And I'm now aware that the term systems modeling is probably far too broad to help us understand actually what we're doing when we're modeling systems. So, in a sense, even the use of language is a particular kind of modeling in and of itself, never mind the formalizations of English language as one instance, or the American English language as another instance, or Chinese, or whatever. So just a observation.
Absolutely, it's a great point. And George, would love to hear your thoughts on this, but I think in my mind, one of the distinguishing features of the systems language approach is that it was designed with the purpose of formal systems analysis explicitly in mind. So it is meant to accompany a methodology of deep systems analysis. And it's my impression that other modeling languages weren't necessarily, they were more for like engineers, building specifications. Would love your thoughts, George, on that.
Well, pardon me. Yeah, the background on the systems language that I proposed in my book is that I started with the ontology of systems and developed the notion of syntax based on how systems can come together. So if you've got two objects and a connection between them, it's all contained in graph theory. You got two objects and something between them that establishes a syntax for a causal relation. And that was basically, I started from that perspective. What is similar or the same, isomorphic for all systems that we can think of, and then develop the language from that. The implementation of the language, it's supposed to both describe the structural relations, but also the functional relations. So it contains both the dynamics of objects as well as the relational structure, say, for example, in a hierarchy or network of small world network nodes and so forth. So I think it's rather comprehensive. It carries along some of the best features of various of the modeling languages that exist right now. And I'm really looking forward to Shingai and Joseph's development of the, pardon me, of the language. We're targeting the XML model because that allows us to embed software code for describing the functional aspects, as well as the nature of XML to be able to describe the structural aspects. The other part of this, though, Peter, you mentioned the systemese. The other part of this is the idea that we human beings, and actually I extend it to animals with brains, we have inherent in the nature of the way the brain works, this fundamental mental language. It's not the spoken language, but the mental language that is really the basis of our ability to perceive and converse about systems in the world.
So,
And that,
yeah, so I mean, so there's a distinction between systemese and the system language that Shanghai and your programmer are working on.
well, no, there's not in the sense that the systemese is our evolved language of systems, and that I moved that from the implicit to the explicit in this system language covered in the book, which is what Shanghai is working on.
Okay, I mean, I guess what I'm in the context of education, which is what's at the top of this coda page, you know, educating anyone, even ISSS members or even me, about the different kind of modeling approaches or software programs. Essentially, I suppose we're talking about computer aided systems modeling. And I put the link to the OpCloud software in the chat there, which if you can put in the notes here, Daniel, be good. Just so that if someone comes new to this whole field, they would go, you know, what is, which modeling approach is preferable for my particular intention? Let me put it to you that way. Because now I've been working on this OpCloud. Tom and I have had many conversations about the software he's using and how we need to have a way to import it into other tools, because it's a really significant repository of information that's organized in a logical way. And it's connected to other work which I'm trying to figure out now, which is and I know Robert's sort of involved in this a little bit as well, is a couple of projects on archives of cybernetics, which is all about communication and control. So, yeah, you know, and then the systems engineering and model basis. Anyway, how to go through the world of systems modeling for particular purposes would be probably a good, even a course to have, or a workshop to have, or conversation to have. Maybe I'll even initiate it.
Thank you. This is awesome. There's a ton of things. I'll just try to briefly mention a few that are relevant. I learned about this serializing, deserializing method. I'm sure George and others are familiar with it. So all these different formats, including the markdowns, the CSVs, other formats, can be read in and out. And by putting it in this formal, which is kind of like, that's like a jump up from the prosaic. And then this does the automatic work of taking that to the next scalable level. So getting into any formal format at this point with the kind of the text macros, you don't even need LLMs for. Transformations amongst essentially any formal system is better than not. And then that kind of, I think, connects, just to kind of skip over the details, to what Peter just said about this. And like, it just made me feel like that 0th level question because if the quest feels like what tool is the best, oh, now there's a tool to find out what tool, and now it's not the perfect, and I'm FOMO and all of this, the anxiety will prevent
Yes.
anything. Whereas if there was like a preliminary layer that was just
Yeah.
like being in the game is
Right.
the process of systems modeling writ large. People have done it their whole life. They're asking the same questions you are. So focus on what is orthogonal to the discipline with making it comfortable for you in your continued work. And then that may lose a lot or gain a lot of people in a given moment, but it's also more honest to the work, which like we're always learning from each other about different methods. So the idea of just like compile a resource or like make a short video, it's just a non sequitur.
Hmm. Zero level systems learning.
But as soon as it falls into any naming, then it's already
Yep.
it's already just the trace, but that's the whole thing. The trace and finger in the moon, the systems learning, and then the system map and territory.
Yeah.
The big ones are not unintuitive. And the technical detail today, more so than 2 years ago, even,
Mm.
these models explain a lot of the introductory materials. So that's grabbing a lot of the attention. And now I think taking that for granted, how do we encourage what goes beyond that for education?
Yeah, an idea that I've been thinking about for a while. I know George has spoken to it in some sessions for the ISSS, but I think if we were to, and this could be a joint initiative between the systems modeling SIG and education, but to have a few different ISSS members take on the task of developing a systems model of the ISSS as an organization using a handful of these different approaches as a learning exercise internally. I think, yeah, educating the outside world is a great goal, but I see a lot of room for reaching more internal consensus and clarity about, the trade-offs
George,
associated with these different approaches. So I'd love to collaborate on that.
George has been banging that drum for years.
Well,
And-
maybe what one thought on that, just of course, while we're just speculating and enjoying,
Yeah.
there's the archival work. So thinking about that in the broader info cybernetic context of what is an organization, like, oh no, that wasn't us, that was that. So
Yeah.
what the boundaries are in space and time and document semantic space. Are we
Yeah.
doing that? Where are we in semantic space? Where are we headed? What's
Yeah.
our reference trail? What documents do we provide internally? What documents do we interface out? All those things are they're all part of these patterns and processes that systems analysis will be amenable to understanding. And so it's almost like a either dual or the same project of the archival side is like, yes, for sure, scanning like the 1950s yearbooks, yes. Also, though, like there's Slack workspaces that, and then the free plan expires. And it was like, well, that's probably not,
Good
that's probably
idea.
harder to retrieve than a 1950s book.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So the real time work too, and then having like and this is where I think Tom's model gives a lot of like work towards, like that there could be a like a versioned or an underlying organizational model. Of course, the only way this would be possible would be system science engineering. And then there's the perspectives and the views so that there's more archival like information interaction and more prospective like all these things kind of come slightly different ways, but they're kind of co-enabled. Like with a systems model and well, just describing could describe some really inefficient things, like probably obviously would. But then like with the systems description, if there was like a sysxml CAD suite, then it'd be like, oh, these two websites are doing this, just boop. Now just the organization changed. Or this change was on the GitHub branch and now it's proposed for a change.
Well, I suppose GitHub might be a good place to think about putting something. I mean, but I mean, I guess you have to pay for some of that as well. But yeah, well, I was just thinking about Google Groups and whether they exist forever, which is just another interesting perspective. Or maybe like on the front page of ISSS, I put together that world of systems. Maybe I need to put, or maybe we or somebody, we could all do this. We could, put together a collection of models and modeling or model tools, maybe, because we're actually talking about tools, aren't we, really? It's modeling tools that we're talking about. So maybe it would be a collection of modeling tools and methods, maybe. I don't know. It's not just a thought as I play with different models in my head. I mean, even I suppose, where does it stop? I mean, you've got models and then you've got modeling. And modeling as a software process or a program process or some computer-based process of engagement. I'm thinking out loud, which is what I tend to do here.
I've thought of that as model-based collaboration, where you collaborate with a community model.
Can you just say a bit more about that?
It's partially from experience I had when I was working and doing a model across multiple lines of business. And I built a single model with input from the other SMEs, if you know the term, subject matter experts.
Yeah.
They knew the information, I knew how to model, we worked together. So they would give me some information and I would do a quick model, come back the next meeting, show it to them. There'd be all sorts of responses saying, oh no, this is not right. Oh, I forgot to tell you about this and so on. And we'd capture that and then I would have another version the next time. After several versions, there'd be pretty much agreement. So it had that effective feedback loop of improvement. And it seems to me that's very important. So when I started doing a model, one of the things I did was try to make it highly adaptable so it could be continually improved. In fact, it's sort of on the model that Russell Acuff suggests of perfectibility. You'll never get perfection, but you can get closer and closer to it over time. So that was sort of the model that I used.
Well, it's interesting just to think about. I'm sorry to be talking so much, but well, am I sorry? I don't know. I mean, we started the ISSS this discussion, Daniel and Merlin and George and a few others, and about the website when Merlin became president and Daniel became VP of Education, and then we split it into two conversations, one about the technology and one about education. Now you brought them back together in sort of in the coda, and essentially the model description of what we're doing is in the coda. I'm just wondering about, modeling us and this process of what we're doing here, just as a way to reflect on what we're doing, I guess.
Yeah. I'd love a bit more context. I'm curious, in terms of like when this conversation started, as far as the website, was it a conversation about how to improve the website and make it like better as a tool for education? Yeah, what was the
Well,
context
no,
of
I
that?
mean,
Yeah.
when I became president-elect, I found that the existing website, which was Drupal, was fairly well compromised, not accessible, and not updated easily. And so I started my ISSS.org as a separate website, not wishing to compete, if you will, or with the existing website, and set about using it for membership management, and then started on SIG pages so that people could access a SIG page. And I would in fact encourage you to think about that as well. If you're doing something with the modeling SIG, is that there's a page on the website, and I would encourage you to put things on there, both in two pages. One would be for public reading, and one might be for the members of the SIG, which might be private and require the login. And then when Jen McCarr and Jen Wilby and myself were talking at the NCOSI meeting in 2020, and Jen McCarr was sort of completing her takeover from Jen Wilby as the VP admin. Jennifer Wilby said, "Why don't you make my ISSS.org?" And I said, "Well, sure, if you're happy with that, as the two, people identified as it were, running the organization. That's fine." So set about doing that. And that then became, what was my ISSS.org that I started became the website you're now looking at as ISSS.org. And then when Rurlin became president, she and Daniel had become VP of Education. She got us together to say, how do we proceed with education on the web? And the website, she had some thoughts. And the rest is history in a sense. I mean, it morphed into what we're doing now, not so much focused on the ISSS website about education, but more about the ISSS education and the technology, because obviously I've assembled all these documents on the website, and I'm still desirous of making them more accessible and relevant. I mean, they are an archive on the ISSS website, but as Rob and we discussed, they're pretty buried. And he's done a great job of indexing everything, which I think we've linked to. But nevertheless, we haven't worked out a way for people to search through the whole lot easily, even to just find the term systems modeling, for example. I mean, how much has been said in 50 years in all the publications on systems modeling? I mean, is it important or relevant, or is it not? Those kind of questions, I guess. So that's the context that I can give you anyway.
There's many more great pieces, but thanks for that great story.
I'd like to come in with sort of the context that I was bringing to your opening a sort of point, Shingai, about your systems language page and your modeling SIG. Because when I heard the terms modeling and that a SIG was being reactivated, my thoughts weren't really around the tools or techniques in particular. I was coming at it from, I think, I don't know if you're familiar with the Scott Page work on model or work on model thinking. He ran a Coursera course, and basically he sort of, I think that it's still available in a free format, but he ran, dozens of different types of models, from economics to science to everyday life. And, the insinuation or the implication was that system thinking was model thinking, in that we need to move away from one single frame or few frame descriptions of systems to thinking in model terms. So that, in the spirit of Tom's perfectibility, we conjure up a model in our discussion, and we have a good idea what that means, and we can find out more information, and we can perfect it as we look at different aspects of that. And of course, when you get into model thinking, you're getting into how can we educate people to think in models, in metaphors, maybe in images as well, in whole groups of concepts rather than particular approaches. And this is where we get into sort of, Peter's systems literacy, and systems education and
Right.
general education and what is wisdom. So that's where I was sort of looking to see where this would go. And I think that that's maybe the hint, the context that Peter's probably sort of bringing in other additional questions for about it. And we are basically talking about the epistemological cognitive endeavor of mankind, you know, as we try and rationalize the sort of natural kinds or reality around us. And that's obviously a huge subject, but arguably it is 90% of systems now are organized systems born out of cognitive rational thinking, even if they are based on nature. And so this is all the world we live in and the world that we need to be, and the languages we need to be talking about in the future, because it reflects the world that we live in. So when we talk about modeling, I tend to think of it in those terms, around cognition and thinking, going back to early times. And then going down from that would be principles and laws, theories, methodologies, methods, frameworks, techniques, tools, languages, formal and informal. And the questions aren't particular frames really, it's that they're more which set of frames, and do we have a complete set of frames to really understand the issues and the way forward. So that to me, when we talk about modeling, is where I'm sort of thinking about.
What was the book or the author or the person you mentioned at the beginning of your?
It's probably Scott Page and his Coursera MOOC on model thinking. I think he's actually published a book on it as well. But the idea is that we should be not collecting words or nouns and adjectives and descriptions. We should be collecting models in our heads and talking models.
Oh, that's
Yeah, thank you for that context. I actually have a book. I have a copy of that book on my bookshelf. I haven't read it, even though several people have recommended it to me. So maybe it's time for me to finally read it. Yeah, I think where I'm coming from, I think there's like a lot of overlap with what you just said, is I'm in a position where I'm very eager to find an approach that lets me analyze and model any system I come across as easily as possible. So whether it's Bitcoin or a biological cell or a neuron or a city, what's the quickest and most accessible way for me to develop a, like what Tom would call a coherent model of any system of interest. And so it feels like the technique and the language that George has provided is the easiest access point for me, but I'm not tied to it as like the ultimate approach. So I'm all for encouraging people to think in terms of models. And I think that, yeah, there probably should be a variety of approaches to achieving that end goal, if that makes sense.
Kind of tie this all up together, point out that evolution produced one of the most magnificent modeling machines that we could know about, and that's our brain. What children do as they develop and learn about the world is they're building models in neural networks. That's basically what the brain does. And so if we wanted to emulate sort of a best kind of modeling approach for building models, constructing models, and using models, both cognitively and in a software version, I think that's probably one of the things that we ought to pay attention to. This is a complex, adaptive, and evolvable system that actually is capable of encoding objects and relations. And it's really a pretty marvelous way to go. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, there's so many great things here. Also, just in terms of the different phases, although there's many other things I could add, I'll just say like also George holding it down with with the insistence and helping like just bring us to the edge of where the modeling could be, I think. Because there was the early part with the website, but I think I personally interpreted that as just being like, let's just kind of like triage and like, oh wow, actually website's a big issue. We don't really have the technical bandwidth right now to do like a website redesign, which is hard enough just for a simple like Google Sites. So let's go back to focusing on the fundamentals and try to get George's work better worked through and developed, and the fundamentals of education and stuff like that. And then of course we had many little side experiments, surveys and the front ends and things like that, keeping the door hopefully open as we tried. However, actually like doing the first level educational work, like developing the curriculum, we just don't have the time for that in 1 hour per week. And so here I think it's been awesome to step back from all of those colliders, first level colliders, and all the systems work and like the systems ecosystem, and then just and then also I like this kind of Peirce, Dewey, abductive reasoning, embodied, generalized modeling is a great angle.
Can I just sort of input in a sort of a philosophical kind of statement? I don't know if you know a Robert Frost poem, The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. It might be familiar to some people, but I see in our daily lives we face a bifurcation constantly, and one branch is, you know, the natural system laws, whatever they are. But rational mind has an option to branch out towards technology, whether it's technical technology or embodied cognition or anything. We can shape the environment around us to bifurcate into a different kind of reality, you know, the safety of our own homes and our cities and our civilizations and so on. And so what we are facing when we abandon the natural philosophical route is we're developing a technology layer which is separate from reality. It's a platform. It's like driving foundations for you know, Venice into shifting sand and building a city or civilization on top of that. It's like building a model like Shannon information model to build you know, a whole digital world in computers based upon that technology branch. So when we are choosing these models or saying, let's just go with this model or that model, this technology, that platform, we're making a conscious choice to go down a particular frame, which will have terrific advantages, a terrific technology branch, but it will also be a bifurcation away from reality in a way. And that the orthogonality that Daniel keeps on mentioning will come back to bite us in some way if we don't have that truth spirit of what
Sorry, wait, Rob,
embedded
repeat from will come back to bite us unless.
or what we want to do as a species.
Like I've seen time warps, but not so bad as this.
Yeah, he's definitely gone on a time warp.
I have a few comments, but I'll wait till he comes back and finishes what he was saying.
Is connection problems.
Oh yeah, massive.
Just the last thing we heard was the orthogonal aspects will come back to bite us unless.
Oh, sorry about that. So yes, you know, why do systems fail and why do they fall apart? Why does society fail? Decline and fall of the Roman Empire, and there must be some intrinsic thing that brings a viable system to the end of its life. And I think it is this bifurcation, is that we get more efficient absorbing inputs in an open system and energy, but we're in danger of losing our soul and integrity unless we can rationally keep it together. And so I think there is this tension going on that slowly dissolves the system and then starts it again. And that's where we have to be just careful about the models that we choose, because we're getting away from maybe the original identity that holds it all together or brought it together in the first place. I don't know if this is making sense, but that's sort of like, why do these things fail? How can we make sure that they persist, these things that we build? And there must be systemic reasons for it. And we just have to be cognizant of that when we adopt a model as a basis for building something on.
So I have a comment on that. There's sort of the question of where knowledge comes from, and the difference between perceptions and realities. So hard to kind of put this in a concise form, but so Don Eade talks about how technology is interpreted. There's this, I think he uses this term hermeneutics. When we're using technologies, you're sort of immersed in the language of that technology, and that entails probably sort of a, let's call it a sub-ontology of the natural reality that we exist in. So there's this tension between sort of that mediated perceptual base and the let's say, the nature as it is. We don't effectively have a theory of it, but sometimes we do. So, natural science sort of struggles with like, what is the nature of reality and that sort of stuff. And as engineers and designers, we sort of define the reality in terms, through technologies and so on. Anyway, point being is that there's an inherent conflict there, right? And we're always going to run into trouble, because that broader reality is something we don't fully understand. It's hidden, and there are a lot of hidden states that we cannot predict. It's much richer than sort of our imaginations permit us to perceive, right? So, and this is what philosophy writes about, what is reality, and then what's our experience. There's always going to be a difference there. Anyway, there's an interesting book. You were talking earlier about sort of being able to sort of express all these ideas more quickly and more effectively. There's Cecilia Hayes writes a book, Cognitive Gadgets, Cultural Evolution of Thinking. Anyway, there's a section in there on imitation, and then veering into language. So essentially what's going on there is kind of a social process of learning and reinforcement. And as concepts sort of become entrained in a social system, they're normed, right? You know, that is, you know, they sort of become learned. And, you know, so there is that connection between education and learning, that, you know, as we develop these concepts, it's sort of like cognitive gadgets, like the alphabet could be a kind of cognitive gadget. An ontology is a kind of cognitive gadget. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out, because I think it might provide some interesting connections with what I think you're trying to do here.
Thank you. That's awesome. It reminds me also a lot of just like fractal role play and games. And like even math, it's like it's a big game. Let's just take A to be the ambiguity matrix and B to be the, you know, latent state transition matrix. And it's like, and then you're off on that sub game. But to the extent that those are disembodied or abstract, there is a map territory, which is like no big deal. It's one pill to swallow. And then there's the fact that it does move away from, it is part of that two roads diverging. In the classical particle understanding. But is it possible that a quantum understanding, hopefully not just like a meme or a LARP one, but a real one, real quantum cognitive understanding, would just have a wave or spectrum looking at the continuum of the roads diverging? And then what? And then just, you know, then full stop. And then see, and you know, let's land that plane even once first. And then there's another vista on the path forward. But that's kind of like a fractal question that resolves these paradoxes. Like I was just reading Dewey, and he talks about like the dark room and the, you know, all Cretans are liars, all these like paradoxes. It's like, no, not in time. If you just take it as a process of inquiry, it's not even an issue. It's just a little symbolic sub-logic. But then incompleteness and halting, it's that like the cow's out of the barn for like 100 years on that. And way further, probably, but just hard to even understand. And then I think the alphabet, that's a great example, because George said earlier, and this was, I mean, Peter said it, and then George kind of jumped in. So like, well, there's the implicit, like the fact that the brain has the where and the when stream, because there really is an invariance of objects with respect to their movements and things like that, you know, seeming to be. That's like a very deep structural evolutionary prior. And then there's what happens in your early life. And then there's like moment to moment dynamic. It's just like, yes, there's all those layers. That's why we need the multi-scale modeling framework. That's why no level or mechanism has like a priori privileged status. But for a given situation, it may matter a lot. But outside of that, it couldn't be said whether it matters. Like there's just so many pieces that this helps us get at. And then the writing it down, no one's like, this is the best or only alphabet. There wasn't even some letters until there were. And there's other alphabets in use, and there's languages you can do phonemes with all different kinds of things. Well, any last thoughts in our minutes? Shingai will meet again Monday. Maybe next Friday we will talk more about yeah, just see what comes up. But any last comments, or we'll end?
I'm good.
Cool. Very fun. All right. Peace, everyone. Bye.
Yeah, thanks all. Bye.
Bye.